Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Tuesday, May 23rd. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I'm referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our day by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. Today is the International Day to End Obstetric Fistula. Obstetric fistula is a devastating childbirth injury and a neglected public health and human rights issue. 2 million women in low-resource settings have an obstetric fistula, and 100,000 more develop one every year. 3 cost-effective solutions can prevent fistula: timely access to high-quality emergency obstetric and newborn care, trained professionals with midwifery skills at childbirth, and universal access to modern contraception. You can learn more and take action to help prevent this preventable condition by visiting endfistula.org. And before I move on, I want to make a quick note that there will be no Good Morning Gardeners this Friday. This is because I'm going to be taking a really exciting trip, and I'll tell you where I went when I get back. And hopefully I will also have a renewed perspective and some interesting things to share with you as well. So this morning I want to chat with you about something that is I think it follows from what I talked about yesterday, because I've kind of been feeling a little bit of the same way this morning as I was the last time I spoke with you. And I think I was speaking with you about feeling discouraged. I'm not sure, but this morning I have been feeling kind of bitter. And feeling bitter is not one of those like fun or socially acceptable emotions that it's like cool to say that you're feeling. It's not a fun feeling. It's really awful, and I think you don't hear a lot of people talking about this except for in the context of saying oh, that bitter old person. Well, part of the reason that I have been feeling like this is because I have been continuing to listen to Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, which is a beautifully written, wonderful book, just chock full of powerful life lessons. And it's a really wonderful book, but it is triggering for me because I sort of by nature compare my upbringing and my experience with especially with graduating high school and then going into college. So I found school easy. I was a straight-A student effortlessly, and I was pretty chronically understimulated. And I could have very easily graduated high school 1 year early. And I really wanted to do this because I wanted to go to college. I mean, obviously, you can tell, I'm a huge nerd, and I wanted to go to college so that I could read longer books and take harder classes. And I was prevented from doing that for what I believe was a really arbitrary, meaningless reason. The reason was that in order to graduate from high school early, I would have had to take one extra class in the 11th grade, and the class was civics or government, whatever the equivalent of that is in high school. Maybe social studies, I'm not sure. But the only time that I could have taken it was Wednesday nights, and because that's the only time the high school offered this class outside of the regular, class schedule. And I was not allowed to take this class because it was imperative that I go to church on Wednesday nights. And maybe not all of you know, but a lot of churches, they not only hold services on Sundays, but they hold services on Wednesday evenings. And yes, it was a Baptist church. So in case that sounds strange that I had to go to church on a Wednesday, yeah, that's it was a Baptist church, and that's pretty common for Baptists, I believe. So yeah, I've been thinking about that, and then thinking about the colleges that I did end up going to. I mean, ultimately, I think they were great, and I loved it. But I found out years later that I could have gotten financial aid that I didn't even know existed when I was in high school, and that's because nobody told me, and I was a kid, and all I knew how to do was read books and write papers and take tests, and I didn't understand how to do the bureaucratic rigmarole to apply to different schools, and I also didn't have any money for application fees. So of course now I know that you can get those waived, but anyway, I digress. I've been kind of reminiscing in an unpleasant way this morning. So that is where I started my day. Not the best day so far. So let's move on to our feel-good moment. And as a reminder, the reason that I included this segment near the beginning of the show is because our emotions are the soil in which our thoughts and ideas grow. I took this idea from Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics, but I really do believe that it's true. And I probably need this feel-good moment more than you do this morning. Our feel-good moment is that you are not too old and it is not too late. You can find countless examples of people who hit their stride and found major success later in life with a simple Google search. I did my own this morning, and as I was skimming through a list of older tech founders and actors, I saw the name Toni Morrison, who I'd heard of but didn't really know much about. Toni Morrison, who is probably most famous for her book Beloved, didn't write her first novel until she was 40 years old. She won her Pulitzer Prize when she was 56 and her Nobel Prize at the age of 62. So after I stumbled upon Toni Morrison, I kind of forgot my intention, which was to assemble a list of late-in-life successes, and I enjoyed scrolling through an article that listed some of her best-known quotes. And I'm going to share a few of these quotes with you. So according to this article, Toni Morrison said, "I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else." And this quote is amazing, to understate it, because it totally pulls back the curtain on official professional jobs to reveal the real importance of working and what's really worth working towards. It also reminds me that I am free to do whatever I want, and it sets me on a mission to help someone else become more free to do whatever they want. And I may not always feel like I have power, but just about everyone has some power in which they can use to empower someone else. The next Toni Morrison quote I am going to share with you is, "Definitions belong to the definer, not the defined." This is a great one for the way I was feeling this morning, because I was defining myself as too old to chase my dreams or to accomplish certain goals. Old and young are arbitrary labels. Who defines exactly when someone becomes old? The phrases too young and too old are judgments built on these arbitrary labels that are defined differently by different people. Once you can accept the arbitrariness of them, these judgments kind of fall away. Our last Toni Morrison quote for this morning is, "Passion is never enough, neither is skill. But try. Forget your name in the street. Tell us what the world has been to you in the dark places and in the light. Don't tell us what to believe, what to fear. Show us belief's wide skirt and the stitch that unravels fear's call." I found this last quote particularly powerful and interesting because She seems to be saying that the only way to create real value when communicating ideas is to demonstrate what you believe. Simply explaining it is not enough. Show us belief's wide skirt and the stitch that unravels fear's call. It's a snippet of poetic prose that, taken out of context like this, could mean at least a dozen different things. When I read it, I interpreted it as prove to us that you really do believe in good things and show us exactly how to dispel our fears. I think it's an inspiring call to action. So because I don't feel like I have a book in my library that can follow these quotes, unfortunately, I don't own a book by Toni Morrison. For our learning moment today, I am just going to read to you an overview of her life. She was born in 1931 and passed away in 2019. I am going to be reading this summary from womenshistory.org. Toni Morrison is one of the most celebrated authors in the world. In addition to writing plays, children's books, her novels have earned her countless prestigious awards, including the Pulitzer Prize and the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama. As the first African-American woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, Morrison's work has inspired a generation of writers to follow in her footsteps. Toni Morrison was born on February 18, 1931, in Lorain, Ohio. The second of 4 children, Morrison's birth name was Chloe Anthony Wofford. Although she grew up in a semi-integrated area, racial discrimination was a constant threat. When Morrison was 2 years old, the owner of her family's apartment building set their home on fire while they were inside because they were unable to afford the rent. Morrison turned her attention to her studies and became an avid reader. She was able to use her intellect on the debate team, her school's yearbook staff, and eventually as a secretary for the head librarian at the Lorain Public Library. When she was 12 years old, she converted to Catholicism and was baptized under the name Anthony after Saint Anthony of Padua. She later went by the nickname Toni after this saint. In 1949, Morrison decided to attend a historically Black institution for her college education. She moved to Washington, D.C. to attend Howard University. While in college, Morrison experienced racial segregation in a new way. She joined the university's theatrical group called the Howard University Players and frequently toured the segregated South with the play. In addition, she witnessed how racial hierarchy divided people of color based on their skin tone. However, the community at Howard University also allowed her to make connections with other writers, artists, and activists that influenced her work. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in English, Morrison attended Cornell University to earn the Master of Arts in English. When she graduated in 1955, she began teaching English at Texas Southern University, but returned to Howard University as a professor. While back at the university, Morrison taught the young civil rights activist Stokely Carmichael and met her husband, Harold Morrison. The couple had 2 children, Harold and Slade. Morrison's work continued to influence writers and artists through her focus on African American life and her commentary on race relations. In 1998, Oprah Winfrey co-produced and starred in the film adaptation of Morrison's book, Beloved. The film also starred major Hollywood actors including Danny Glover and some others. Following this, Morrison's book were featured 4 times as selections for Oprah's book club, and while writing and producing, Morrison was also a professor in the creative writing program at Princeton University. So she had a really prestigious career, and in the year 2000, she was named a living legend by the Library of Congress. So Morrison also wrote children's books with her son until his death at 45 years old. 2 years later, Morrison published the last book they were working on together and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom that same month. In June of 2019, the director of Timothy Greenfield Sanders released a documentary of her life called Toni Morrison, The Pieces I Am. Morrison passed away 2 months later from complications of pneumonia. So, for today's focus moment, I want you to try and let go of at least one label that you have accepted for yourself. It might be too young, too old, too quiet, too loud, too much, not enough, too big, too small, too dumb, too smart, too unlucky, or too disadvantaged. And once you choose this label that you have allowed to become part of yourself, I want you to let it go. You know, these labels, they become adhered to us like strong stickers that have been stuck for a really long time. And they might be really, really stuck on there, but you can still scrape them off. Any label preceded by the word too, spelled T-O-O, is simply too arbitrary for us to live by. It's a belief, not a fact. And I guarantee you this kind of label holds you back, because I know it holds me back. Believing in this label is basically a habit of thought, and it's usually much more difficult to release a bad habit than it is to adopt a good habit. This is why replacing a bad habit with a good habit is a common strategy. I think replacing your limiting belief with an inspiring mission is a good idea. And if you don't know what kind of mission you'd like to replace it with, Toni Morrison has given us some ideas. Help someone become free. Empower someone. Demonstrate what you believe. And show someone how to dispel fear. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.